Hello, students. Can you?
Oh, it's Dr. Driver
Yeah.
here. Not sure this is recording. We'll see if it's doing it. Seems to be. Okay. This is an introductory lecture on goddesses for our course, Lit 290Q. In this course, we will make our way from the ancient to the early modern world of England, with many stops along the way. Goddesses are the divine makers and creators, the holy mothers, wives, and lovers, and they are often connected with nature, sometimes associated with ideological myths. Ideological means how things came to be, and usually describes aspects of nature in mythology. For example, Narcissus is a young handsome man who falls in love with his own reflection in a pond and spends so much time looking at himself he forgets to eat and drink and sleep, and then is transformed into a flower known as Narcissus. This is where Sigmund Freud gets the notion of narcissism, someone who's so self-involved that he can't really draw attention away from himself. Or the story of Niobe. Niobe explains where waterfalls come from. Niobe's children are wonderful. She boasts about them. The gods become offended by her hubris, slaughter the children, and she weeps so much she becomes a waterfall. Goddesses are powerful, influential, and perhaps still with us, at least in our stories. They are often associated with birth, rebirth, and resurrection. The first goddess we're going to discuss is Isis. Isis is originally Egyptian, but her cult spread throughout the ancient world. She is the mother, creator, goddess of them all, according to Apuleius, the author of the Golden Ass in the 2nd century, written in the 2nd century CE or AD. In the Golden Ass, the main character, Lucius, has a vision of Isis, who describes herself this way: I, the natural mother of all life, the mistress of the elements, the first child of time, the supreme divinity, the queen of those in hell, the first among those in heaven, the uniform manifestation of all gods and goddesses, the mother of all gods. Apuleius in the Golden Ass describes Isis as having many names and manifestations, taking on variously the attributes of Venus, Minerva, Diana, Proserpina, Ceres, Juno, and Hecate, but her true name is Isis. In the Egyptian story, she is married to her brother Osiris, which was also typical Egyptian practice among the royalty. Cleopatra was actually married to her brother. Their son is Horus, which is the word for time, from which we get the English hours, and she represents rebirth, resurrection, and magic. Her cult was important in Egypt and across Rome from the 4th century BCE to the 4th century CE, so that's about 1,000 years. The priests and priestesses in her temples were seen as healers. She is the daughter of Geb, the god of earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. Her association with magic originates with the sun god, Ra. Isis created the first snake, which then bit Ra. Near death, Ra gave Isis his secret name so she could revive him. With that secret name, she possessed the power to heal and prolong life or bring the dead back to life. Cleopatra, whom you see here in 2 versions, Liz Taylor in the 1960s film, which I don't think is particularly based on Shakespeare, and also a sculpture of Cleopatra, which is probably closer to what she actually looked like. Anyway, Cleopatra was the historical queen of Egypt who lived through war and strife to the ripe old age of 39. And I'm not entirely joking here. Living to age 39 was quite a feat in those days. Egypt was finally conquered by Rome but Cleopatra chose to die honorably by suicide instead. And you may remember the story of the farmer who brings her a basket of figs in which is concealed an asp, and she allows herself to be bitten by the snake because she did not want to be paraded as a war prisoner through the streets of Rome. She was an author, though her books are now lost. It's thought that she wrote a book on medicine and a book on makeup. And she was the lover of two Roman rulers, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. She styled herself as Isis, partly as a marketing ploy and partly because she believed it. The rulers of Egypt had always styled themselves as divinities, as gods. In Shakespeare's play, Antony and Cleopatra, Cleopatra is the main character and shown as much stronger ultimately than Antony. Her character in the play has been called a masterpiece by the critics, and her own life was even more interesting. Ishtar, also called Inanna, was a Sumerian goddess, again with a widely known cult, who appears in one of the first great epics, Gilgamesh. As queen of heaven and earth, she represents the divine feminine as well as resurrection. Her other aspects include nurturing, healing, and wisdom. She was the most prominent female deity in ancient Mesopotamia. The height of her cult was between 4000 and 2000 BCE in the Uruk period. Her name means Lady of Heaven in Sumerian. Her temples housed priestesses who would each take a man to bed with them on the spring equinox to reenact the divine marriage between Inanna and her consort, Dumuzi. She also dies and is reborn. Hecate is a central character in the Theogony, which we will be reading. Theogony means the genealogy of the gods. She's often shown with 3 heads because she can see the past, the present, and the future. She's also the goddess of crossroads and thresholds, that is, when you step in and out of a doorway. As a kind of goddess of transition, of change. And she sometimes is associated with Isis and always associated with the moon. Later she becomes associated actually with black magic. Demeter, or Ceres, is the Greek goddess of grain, nature, and fertility. The story of the loss of her daughter Persephone to Hades and her rescue by Demeter explains the seasons, why we have winter. She is also the originator of the mystery cults at Eleusis, a town in Greece, which had something to do with death and rebirth. The rites of Eleusis, or the Eleusinian mysteries, were the secret rituals of the mystery school of Eleusis, and were observed regularly from circa 1600 BCE to 392 CE. Exactly what this mystic ritual was, no one knows. That's why it's called a mystery. The rituals were enacted twice a year. There were the lesser mysteries, which took place in the spring, and the greater mysteries, in which those had been purified earlier took part when September came. They walked the sacred way from Athens to Eleusis, calling for the Kore, or maiden in Greek, who is Persephone, and reenacting Demeter's search for her lost daughter. Demeter is sometimes associated with Gaia, the goddess of the earth, and features in the Homeric hymns, a collection of verses composed by different authors from the 8th century BCE to the Hellenistic period, which ends about 31 BC. Aphrodite, or Venus, is the goddess of love, whose name in Old English is Frigg, which gives us the name of the weekday Friday. If you think about French or Spanish, you can see the word Venus usually in the name for Friday. According to the Theogony, Aphrodite is born of the castrated genitals of her father, Uranus, which were flung into the sea. The name Aphrodite means foam-born. In later Roman mythology, Venus is given two distinct personalities: the Venus genitrix, the fertile generator, the creator, the founder of the family, and the Venus meretrix, the prostitute, the encourager of lust and license. She is seen in the story of Cupid and Psyche as a demanding and jealous mother-in-law, and is said in the Odyssey to have committed adultery with the god of war, Mars or Ares. She is married to Hephaestus, the lame god of the forge and patron of metalworkers. Diana, or Artemis, is the goddess of the hunt. She is the goddess of the moon and a virgin goddess. She is seen as the guardian of wild animals, forests, and the natural world. She is the twin sister of Apollo, the sun god. According to Roman mythology, Diana was given her bow and arrow by her father, Jupiter. Because their mother, Leto, bore Diana and her twin brother, Phoebus Apollo, without pain, Diana is also sometimes seen as the patron saint of childbirth. So she's a virgin goddess, but oversees women in labor in childbirth. Urvashi is an apsara, a woman divinity usually associated with nature in Hindu legend. There are many meanings for her name. It may mean she who can control the heart of others, or it may mean widely pervasive, whatever that means. But in its first appearances in Vedic texts, in the Vedic texts, Urvashi is the name for the dawn goddess. She was a celestial maiden in Indra's court and was considered the most beautiful of all the apsaras. She is the divine child of Dyaus, the sky father, and Prithvi, the earth mother. Urvashi marries the king Pururavas, who loses her, then seeks her throughout the world, and who eventually is made an immortal like his wife. Parvati, the goddess of devotion, is the mother of Ganeshi, whom you see here on the left, the elephant-headed god who is known as the overcomer of obstacles and who represents joy and luck. Ganeshi often works in tandem with Lakshmi, the Hindu goddess of abundance. Parvati, the mother of Ganeshi, is the Hindu goddess of fertility, love, and devotion, and of strength and power. She is part of the Tridevi, the trinity of powerful Hindu goddesses, together with Lakshmi and Saraswati. Her name means she of the mountain, and her icons and representations date to 400 BCE. Kuan Yin is a Buddhist goddess of compassion, or goddess of mercy. She was originally a male saint who changed his gender during the Northern Song dynasty, but since then has been worshipped as a goddess. She is a bodhisattva, a holy person, a Buddha. She protects women and children and is often associated with music. Kuan Yin is an incarnation of Avalokitesvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. Her name, translated from Chinese, means one who hears the cries of the world. Like the Virgin Mary in Christianity, Kuan Yin is seen as an intercessor, one who intercedes for humankind. The Lotus Sutra, written about 406 CE, mentions Kuan Yin 33 times, and her lucky number is 33. The mudra, or hand gesture, often associated with Kuan Yin, is the Yoni mudra, which is basically woman's genitalia. Her cupped hands symbolizing the womb to remind us that we all enter the world through our mothers. Pele is the creator goddess of the Hawaiian Islands. She embodies volcanic divine passion, who shows us that fire purifies, makes way for the new, and can act as a creator as well as a destroyer. A goddess worshipped in ancient Hawaii, she is sometimes called Madame Pele or Tutu Pele, and she is still venerated in Hawaii. Visitors to the summit of Mauna Loa still bring offerings to Pele. The Virgin Mary, here shown in the Annunciation, when she's being told that she will become the Mother of God, is the mortal mother of Jesus, who is chosen by God to bear his Son, conceiving Jesus through the agency of the Holy Spirit, and through Jesus bringing resurrection after death. Through the various apocryphal stories that circulate about her, she is known to have been bodily assumed into heaven, that is, she never dies physically, and was herself a product of the Immaculate Conception, the doctrine that Mary was free of original sin since her conception in her mother's womb. She is called the Mother of Miracles and is the particular patron of children, teachers, and healers. Mainly she's known for her powers of intercession. The Black Madonna is one version of the Virgin Mary. There are many representations of her, and she's thought by some scholars to be a later representation of Isis with Horus. She can be found in cathedrals across Europe. There are sculptures and paintings of the Black Madonna. So she's an interesting figure or aspect of the Virgin Mary. Virgin of Guadalupe is an apparition of the Virgin Mary that appeared to Juan Diego in Mexico in 1531. No one believed him, and the Virgin instructed him to gather roses, as I recall, and placed them in his cloak, and then when he went to see the bishop, he showed the cloak, and there, miraculously imprinted was this image. The cloak is now displayed in the cathedral, the Basilica of Guadalupe in Mexico City. The backstory on the Virgin of Guadalupe is rather interesting because the place where Juan Diego saw her was the place where a temple to an earlier fertility goddess had been, a pagan goddess. Finally, Elizabeth I, born 1533 and died 1603, the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, and England's greatest ruler. She remained single and styled herself the Virgin Queen, or sometimes as Gloriana or Diana, and was given names of other mythological goddesses. Early in her reign, Elizabeth was sometimes called England's Deborah, Deborah's a character in the figure in the Old Testament, who was a prophetess and judge, but Deborah was also a wife and mother, so those images sort of go away once Elizabeth really makes up her mind never to marry. So as her reign continues, Elizabeth drops this imagery in favor of being the Virgin Queen, or as Edmund Spenser called her, the Fairy Queen. She is also referred to as an imperial votress in Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, a reference to the Vestal Virgins of Rome, who were virgin priestesses of the hearth goddess Vesta. The character of Titania in Midsummer Night's Dream is also said to be based on her. The Vestal Virgin imagery was particularly popular in her representations, including a series of portraits with the symbol of a sieve held in the Queen's hand, which identified her with the Vestal Virgin Tukia, who had employed a sieve full of water to prove her chastity. So those are our figures for this term, more or less. Now go on and take the quiz.